Welcome back to the final hour of the Gary Sutton Show. I've made it for 2 hours now with this voice. I might as well go a third one, right? 50 years ago yesterday, actually it was 50 years ago Saturday when you really look at it, but they had the march on Saturday, the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. Now, for those of you of a certain age, and you were around during then, it was a time when civil rights activists, black and white, were marching arm in arm across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. And they were trying to march to the state capitol. And we commemorate the 50th anniversary of that. We'll tell you a little bit about, after we talk with Stacy Swimp here in a moment, a little bit about a controversy that came up this morning and involving the liberal media. But the question is, what are the strides that we've made since then? Is this the same civil rights movement now that was around then? Stacy Swimp, in addition to his membership in the Project 21 Black Leadership Network, is the founder of Revive Alive Missional Ministry. And we talked this morning about what our nation has achieved in civil rights and what are we still missing here 50 years later. Stacy, good to have you on the show this morning. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Stacy, and thank you for changing the time with us, too. We really do appreciate that this morning. I want to ask you your thoughts when you saw the gathering there on Saturday and obviously the commemorations of this march to the state capitol across this Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma.
A plethora of thoughts crossed my mind. I'm glad to see it in one sense. I mean, as a Christian minister, I think of when the children of Israel were led through the Red Sea by the Lord God, and he told them to build up memorial stones and to teach their children and their children's children what he had done for them and bring them out of Egypt. So I don't think there's anything wrong with retrospection and looking back at the delivery from bondages that we've experienced as a people.
Nor do I. I think it's a great thing to keep that in mind and make sure that people know what it was all about then, because there was real racism at that particular time rampant throughout the South. Go ahead.
No doubt. But the reason I use the scriptural example, because I think that we have to transcend this conversation a little bit. Yes, it's true that institutionalized racism, chattel slavery, Jim Crow, all those things are realities. But, the fact is it was our Judeo-Christian values that ultimately led us and put us in a position where we could break the back of Jim Crow. It was black Christians coming together in faith. It was not on the basis of Afrocentricity or ethnocentrism that movement was thrust forward, but it was a movement based upon faith. Dr. King was a Baptist minister, and he made it very clear that his aim was to do the will of God. And so I think when I see these kind of things, one of the things that concerns me is that, yes, we should celebrate the freedom that we, the American people, have accomplished together. Yes, we should reflect upon the valuable lessons of history, but we should also understand how to juxtapose those historical lessons with current social, political, and most of all, personal moral practice. And I think that's where we're missing the boat. When I look at Selma, I looked at Barack Obama was down there, Elijah Cummings was down there, people who are advocating moral decadence, abortion, same-sex marriage redefinition. I mean, you have leaders advocating these kind of things down in Selma, Alabama this past weekend. So to me, that was an oxymoron. And so I think that we have to challenge ourselves in our community to make sure that we are consistent with the values and the hope and the vision and most of all, the faith of our predecessors. And I think that's the missing component there.
Stacy, I was reading one of your fellow members of Project 21 Black Leadership Network who said, and this was Derek Queen, who wrote that 50 years ago, black people in this country, black Americans, were suffering under legalized racial segregation. Now, he said, there are those who maintain a black grievance industry. The bastard child of the civil rights movement wanted to make others think America is still like the Selma of decades ago. In doing so, they trivialize how our nation has matured. Racial disparities remain, but many of these pains are self-inflicted on a few, while society as a whole enjoys social, economic, political benefits that those who suffered on Bloody Sunday can only imagine experiencing back then, quote unquote. Your thoughts on that statement?
Well, I certainly think there's something to be said about initiative and personal responsibility. Dr. King gave a speech in 1965, and he said to this predominantly black audience that no Lincolnian, no Tennessonian, no Johnsonian civil rights bills could do this for us. He said, but that we had to, he said, no Emancipation Proclamation can do this for us, in fact. What was he talking about? He said that we had to reach down in the innermost parts of our own soul and sign with the pen of self-asserted manhood our own Emancipation Proclamation. So King wanted to push the civil rights bills because he understood that we had to address the public policy side of things, but he also realized that that would not be the end-all, be-all, do-all. We have our role that we have to play along the side of those public policy solutions, and I think that's what my colleague was trying to say, and I have to agree with that. You know, I don't want to make light of the fact that we still have some institutional issues. You know, the Davis-Bacon Act is still in place. The Davis-Bacon Act was a Jim Crow law that was passed to keep blacks in particular from competing against all white unions in 1931. So that law is still in place. It doesn't exclusively impact blacks, but certainly disproportionately impacts black labor. So project labor agreements, you know, I could go down the line. There are regulations in the labor industry that I think a legitimate argument can be made that you have Jim Crow laws in America today being pushed primarily by the Democrat Party. So I think we have to be honest about that. But at the same time, we have unacceptable illiteracy rates, disproportionately so in these urban centers. We are doing less with more access than our predecessors. So that responsibility falls on us. And so we have to challenge ourselves and challenge one another to keep our expectations high, keep each other accountable, and remember that freedom is not free. And as Reagan said, we have a responsibility because we don't want to look and face the next generation and have to explain to them why they are not free.
We're talking with Stacy Swimp, member of Project 21 Black Leadership Network, and also the founder of Revive Alive Missional Ministry. You know, you said something a moment ago that really I just kind of mulled it over, and it came back around to me, and I want to throw it back to you because I think it was a brilliant statement. You said that Dr. King made this a religious and also, therefore, a moral argument back then. Today, we seem like we want to make an argument about civil rights, but we want to take the moral and religious out of it. And you kind of alluded to that in the beginning. I don't want to take your words and change them all, but do you see that same thing today where we want to kind of say, well, you know, we still believe that there's civil rights. We don't think, and for some people that say nothing's changed since back then, which we know is not true, although, as you mentioned rightfully, there are still places where it's unfair around this country for a lot of people, but in this particular case, black people. And so the point is, but somehow we want to take the moral fiber out of the argument. Is that a fair statement?
No, it's a very fair statement. I think it's a balanced perspective. I think it's very true that Black Americans still face many institutional barriers in our country. That's just a fact. And but nothing like what we saw in the 50s and 60s. I mean, you're talking about a time in America in the 60s where we could be spit on acceptably in the public. That doesn't happen today. You're talking about a time in America during the march in Southern Alabama where we couldn't walk down the sidewalk with a white American and we had to step off the sidewalk. Segregation. We have come a long way when it comes to the public policy. And so we have to be realistic and we have to reject those notions for those who say Selma now, as if somehow we are in the same position today as we were 1965. I think that's an insult to the sacrifices of those who came before. That's an insult to the lives of black and white people who were dying. What about that lady Viola? I don't remember her last name. It was a white woman who was killed. She was murdered shortly after the march in Southern Alabama. I think it would be an insult to her sacrifice, her being a martyr, to say that she died in vain and that we're exactly in the same place that we were yesteryear. But yes, we have a moral dilemma today because here in the inner cities, in 1965, I think the statistics show that less than 10% of black women were single mothers. Well, today, many studies say that more than 70% of our women are single mothers. So there's something to be said about a moral collapse in our community that contradicts the moral high standards of Dr. King and the average black family at that time. So, yes, there's something wrong, culturally wrong, we're going in the wrong direction. And some of the same people who are out there leading the march, i.e. Barack Obama and some of the other ones, they're the ones who are actually perpetuating this moral decadence and collapse all the way from the White House. So I think that we have to be careful about who we're following, why we're following, and make sure that we don't get so caught up in novelty that we abandon the need to embrace substance, my friend.
Stacy, in the same week that we have the Selma commemoration, we see a fraternity come out with a racist chant. Now they have demonstrations against this fraternity, which closed down right away. We have the Ferguson report come out that says the police force in Ferguson crude and very terrible jokes about black people and so forth. And yet they found that the policeman who killed Michael Brown acted in accordance with the way he was supposed to. And what happens, there seems to be a real transference here. And I think for a lot of us who don't think in that way, who feel like you have to apologize before you say something, they don't feel like they're racist in this country. They don't feel like they're looking at things differently in a negative way. And so when you look at all that kind of stuff, figure that into this whole conversation as well. It seems like there's a transference factor where they want to say, well, this happened in Ferguson and this happened here in this fraternity, and that really is emblematic of what all people in America think about this whole civil rights discussion.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you, and I'll tell you that I don't think most white or black Americans bring very much intellect to the discussion of culture. And I think that we have a society today where people are way too emotional and reactionary on every side. So you got black Americans, too many of us don't know how to differentiate between real victimization and perceived victimization. And then many of my white brothers and sisters, and I call them my white brothers and sisters because the Lord said that we are made in His image. And we are and you are my brother in the sense that we were all made in the image of God. And I think it's very important that we stop dividing ourselves among so-called ethnic cultural lines and realize that we were all made with the print of God in His image, and that's just my stance. I just put that out there.
Well, okay? it sounds like you're right. That I've said it before. No hyphenated Americans. No hyphenated humans. I mean, we are who we are.
I feel very strong. I feel very strongly about that. And so I find that on both sides, no one is listening to each other. Everyone wants to be right.
Right.
Instead of saying, you know what, I don't understand you, brother, but I'm trying to listen. And we need to listen to each other. Black folks need to stop. Many of us need to stop being too assuming about others, and then many of my white brothers and sisters perhaps should try not to be so angry and different and bitter, because the fact is that none of us are getting anywhere that way. So this is not an easy thing, but I think that we've come a long way, and we can accomplish some things if all of us can learn a little bit more about humility. And so that's, as a minister, that's my perspective. I think we're missing, and here's the thing. We need to re-educate and retrain the way we think, the way we speak. There is really no such thing as race. And that's the first thing we have to understand, is that race is really is a false construct. It's a misnomer that was created in and of itself by a system of white supremacy at the time that tried to justify slavery by saying that black people were innately inferior. Well, we know that's not true today. The fact is that word race is a false construct. It's a false doctrine. There is no such thing as race the way we use it today.
But people keep on using it today as an argument to fit their particular, as a point to fit their particular argument. And again, going back to what you said, trying to win an argument on their side when we ought to be trying to figure out everything on one side, which is the human race and Americans themselves.
We have what we call, the Bible says that let us make man in His image. So that tells me we have something called mankind. Okay, and you ever notice how historians and archaeologists, when they're digging up bones, you never hear them use terms like race, do you?
No, you don't.
You don't read. They don't say things like we found the bones of someone from the black race. They don't say things like that because they understand that it doesn't exist. And so if we can get with that and say, wait a minute. Yes, we have ethnic or different cultural groups, but there's no real significant difference between us that matters. And so we need to figure out how we can focus in on what we have in common, the commonality between your struggle to survive and my struggle to survive. And if we can focus on that, Stop allowing the media, the politicians, and the pundits to divide us for their aims and purposes when in fact we have more in common than we are disalike. And we have something in particular that we need to do together, and that is we need to fight against these common core curriculums that are looking to manipulate and exploit and expose our children to the federal government. We need to fight against abortion. We need to fight against these over-regulation and government that are unemploying our people at ridiculous rates. I say our people, I'm not just talking about black people, I'm talking about the American people.
Right.
So the things that we need to be coming together, Selma ought to be an inspiration to all of us. And that's why I love the fact that people went down there, but we ought to be inspired by that because people came together, they saw an injustice, and everybody came together and they said, we know that some of us may even lose our lives. And here's the thing I want to say to your listeners on the radio show. The hypocrisy that I did see in Selma is that Dr. King once said, as a man is not ready to die for a righteous cause, he is not fit to live. My question is, how many protesters down in Selma this weekend are willing to give their very life for a righteous cause?
Well, it's a great question and some wise counsel this morning. Stacy, always great to have you in the program. I look forward to our next time soon, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stacy Swimp with us on the Gary Sutton Show. Some pretty powerful stuff there. We're going to put that up on the Facebook page for tomorrow, and you can check that out then.